Well, hello, everyone. Greetings again to the Western Connecticut UFO Conference. It's Paul Eno here, and
Ben Eno as well.
We're very happy to be with you in some way. We're sorry we could not be there in person today. So let's just continue and see where we go with UFOs, aliens, and poltergeists. All right. Apparently we're going nowhere. Let's
give it a go.
There we go. Thank you, Beth. You have the magic touch.
Beautiful.
Okay. First of all, with any of the things we're talking about, and Ben will say as well as I do that we need to define our terms.
Indeed. There's too many terms, and sometimes we don't even know what we're talking about.
Well, don't tell people that.
Well, we talk
loudly.
We talk past each other.
We do very often. Okay, so what are UFOs or UAPs? Now, we assume the UFOs are craft. Most people, anyway, assume that they are craft from other planets, such as these might be. And on the other hand, they appear at times just to be lights. You remember when we had Ted Phillips on the show a few years ago?
Yes.
The late Ted Phillips, he had the greatest collection of UFO landing material, I think, in the world, greatest database. And he said that the nature of UFOs had been changing over the previous 20 years or so. And you have things like this now much more often than you have nuts and bolts craft with landing gear and all this. And we seem to, I got this picture myself from Pennsylvania of these weird lights near the ground. And are they UFOs in the traditional sense? Well,
I believe Ted Phillips's term was a more ethereal craft.
Yes. Yeah. He was talking about probes and light balls, things of this kind. Now, here's one that we actually captured on video in 2019. We'll show you that video in a bit. And this is in the Pennsylvania Triangle, as we call it, the same place where I got the previous picture. And is this a craft? Notice the darker than dark beneath it. This is a star. And the 6 of us watched this for the better part of 3 minutes. Come out behind these trees and go, and you'll see the video in a minute.
So sad I missed it.
Well, you had to be here producing the show for the next day. And, what was really sad was Mark D'Antonio from MUFON. He was supposed to be with us, but he will be tortured by inner demons for the rest of his life because he couldn't make the trip. Now, one thing that struck me about this was that you've got a strange this isn't a craft. This is an artist or cosmologist's conception of a white hole in space. Now, we've all heard of black holes that, suck material in, but these white holes seem to push material out from, it's speculated, parallel universes. All right, so let's, this was the crazy gang involved in that weekend there. And we'll play the video. And you tell me what you think this UFO is. Because you have to email because we're recording. And I was doing the Blair Witch cinematography thing, trying to get a good shot with my brand new Best Garter infrared binoculars.
We shall call it art.
Yes. And there it is moving down the sky. The solid object here came out of it, went back into it eventually. And we're wondering what this really is. Is it a craft? Is it a portal, as the classic term might go? An intersect point in the multiverse. All sorts of things come and go in this place, particularly Bigfoot. Seems to be changing shape or turning around. And there we had that. So, right, that's where we go here. There we go. What do I do here, Ben?
Press X. Beautiful.
Okay.
And now what we shall do.
Beautiful. There we go. Okay, thank you. What would I do without you? Okay, so, and there's also the notion of context. We will put labels on things that we can understand. And so we have, as a result, all sorts of confusion about what things may be. Orbs are very popular in the paranormal world today. Everybody says, aha, there must be spirits. Or if you see one in the sky, aha, it's a UFO. Here's one right over our heads on the TV show one day. And this looks like me taking a picture of one in the Pennsylvania case. This is in the Connecticut case, not too far from where some of you are sitting right now in the Danbury Library. It's in Torrington. So I think we have to consider context, and that our explanations are never quite good enough. And what are aliens? There are all sorts of different renditions, and Hollywood does this, and people think they see this, and there are all sorts of things that may be not necessarily from other planets. They might be from, and this is being taken seriously now, other dimensions or other alternative worlds, places of being. And so aliens may be something, maybe from other planets. They may not be. They may be all of the above. And again, our labels, aliens, demons, elves, fairies, you name it, and you do name it. You put labels on things. We put labels on things. There are those who see that I have a theological education and will say, aha, you must believe that all aliens are demons. Well, that's another demon. That's another term we have to define.
Indeed. Especially if you go back to the original Greek term of demon.
Right.
Spelled Daemon.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning just a spirit in general.
Right.
Even
And,
Socrates refers to his demon in some of his writings.
A lot of them do. Yeah. And everybody goes, whoa, this is bad. Well, I know it just meant a spirit of some kind. And there are those who believe that all demons all aliens are actually demons, and whatever kind of alien you're talking about. However, that's not what I believe. I think from what I've seen in my experience, and others may disagree, that it may be just the opposite, that the demons of our human experience, even the parasites, that, as we call them, could be alien in a very broad sense of the term. We'll get into that in a bit. What are poltergeists? Okay, now we were giving a program here that you don't often hear UFOs associated with poltergeists. Well, think again, because I've seen it happen. And here is, is this a poltergeist? There were poltergeist phenomena going on in this house in Burrillville, Rhode Island in the 1990s. Ben later, there's a long running case. Ben later got involved when he was younger. And this is an entity that I think was causing the poltergeist activity in some cases. Are poltergeists caused by, the parapsychologist will tell you, RSPK, recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis. The cases where I've worked with people who have been bothered by poltergeists, or maybe the agents concentrating their energy somehow, and all this stuff happens around the house, and all of a sudden the dining room furniture starts to float. Demons, which has a lot of baggage, a theological concept here of the servants of Satan who are trying to wreck everybody's lives. Angry ghosts, that's also been proposed. This is a particular rendition of shadow people, with credit to our friend Heidi Hollis, who invented the term. So these are all things we have to look at as far as what are we talking about. We're not the first ones to know these things. These are cave paintings from about 33,000 years ago in Australia. And you can see the craft that seemingly almost the classic gray type figures here, and strange people look like they're in suits. This is very, very common in human experience throughout history, whatever it may be. And they thought they were in touch with supernatural beings. Now, I guess you have to go back. I don't like to talk about myself, believe it or not, but you have to kind of go back to trace some of the experiences that I had to understand why we today think this way.
Who is this dapper young man?
Well, that apparently is your father. And this is me as well, quite a bit less of me than there is today, I might say. And I happened to run into, in June of 1970, an article in the Hartford Courant in Connecticut by this man, or at least about this man, Harry Chase, local historian. And he had been running around for years with his old box camera, taking pictures of an old lost settlement in Northeast Connecticut that was known as the Lost Village. And we get all kinds of strange things on the film. Now, I happened to be studying for the priesthood at the time. This was the first seminary I attended, St. Thomas in Bloomfield, Connecticut. I entered when I was 14, when you could still do that. And I was very interested in the paranormal. I didn't talk much about that because the faculty was not. Ghosts and Poltergeists by Father Herbert Thurston was the only book in the seminary library that even dealt with this subject. People think priests are trained in the paranormal, or at least their narrow view of it, and that is not the case. Only certain ones are, and you're supposed to go to them if you're a parish priest. And these are the diocesan exorcists. We'll hear about in a minute. And these are two of my classmates that we were investigating a case at that lost village, and all sorts of amazing things happen. I've talked about that in other cases, and it's in my other presentations, and it's in my book. So let's forward a few years to 1973. Lunch meat was 35 cents a pound, but if you could get gas, you were lucky. There were gas lines, and people today, well, I guess we're getting back to that in a way, but we have, you had to have a certain license number, had to end in an even number to get gas on a certain day. It was really crazy. The biggest show on TV was Telly Savalas with Kojak. And I did not have time to watch it because I was involved in the paranormal. And here were my mentors. Today, everybody knows Ed and Lorraine Warren. They were interested in this idea that I had, that there was going to be, that some of these ghosts that we see in it were souls in purgatory. I wrote something about that. Lorraine read it and thought that was a fabulous idea. So they invited me down to dinner, and that's how I started working with them for about 6 years. Everybody knows them from the Conjuring movies. They're quite as dapper as they look in the movies. But this is Father John Nicola, who was the technical advisor for the film The Exorcist, which was released in December 1973. And he was had a very anonymous job in Washington, D.C., but he knew my brother, who was a priest across the street teaching at the seminary there. And he introduced me. I think he later regretted it, but I would visit. I was in Washington a lot, and I would visit with Father Nicola, who was the leading exorcism expert in the American Catholic Church at the time. And over here, so I got the theological perspective from him. Over here is Dr. Louisa Rhine and her husband, Joseph B. Rhine, Dr. Joseph B. Rhine, and she were the pretty much the founders of modern parapsychology in America at Duke University. So this is how I kind of got started. Now, my bishop, John A. Marshall of the Diocese of Burlington, Vermont — I would have served in Vermont if I'd been ordained to the Catholic priesthood — did not like any of this. I was too young. I should have been studying. And he raised his magic hand and sent me to a seminary I'd never even heard of before, for the college level seminary, or senior college level, where you studied philosophy. Wadham's Hall Seminary in Ogdensburg, New York. I'd never even heard of Ogdensburg, never mind Wadham's Hall. And there was a lot of cows.
Holy cow.
Yeah, exactly. They'd come, if your dorm room was on the first floor, they'd come and look in your window. It was pretty creepy, because the Diocese of Ogdensburg owned the seminary, and they owned a lot of land. They rented it to the farmers, and the cows would break down the fences, especially in the spring, and they'd come and bother us. Anyway, and that's me there. So, but Bishop Marshall figured he'd keep me out of mischief by sending me to nowhere here. But he didn't figure on Father Lawrence — I call him Father Lawrence Wheeler in the book — and the Ogdensburg State Asylum for the Insane, officially known as St. Lawrence State Hospital in Ogdensburg, New York. Father Lawrence was the chaplain there, Catholic chaplain, and he was also the exorcist for the Diocese of Ogdensburg. And I got to know him. He lived at the seminary. He didn't teach. He finally called me into his room one day and said, you work with Ed and Lorraine Warren? I said, yes, Father, I do. So that's how I started to work with him on some of the exorcism cases that really kind of shook me up a lot. So UFOs, aliens, and exorcisms, I mean, where does that come from? Well, this is where I started to see connections with all the things we're talking about. Now, on the surface of it, exorcism is a religious practice of expelling demons and driving out demons and all this sort of thing, with the assumption being that these are servants of Satan and that have all the theological attributes that they're commonly associated with. Now, one thing we would look at in the hospital is things happening outside the control of the actual patient. In other words, if you're standing in the room with the doctor, hospital staff, and the chairs start to float or things start to fall off shelves on the other side of the room, obviously this is not attributable to any psychosis the patient has been diagnosed with. So this is what we would look for. And it did happen more often than people might think. And Father Lawrence was called in on it, and I would help him during the 1973-74 year there. Excuse me. We used this ritual, or he did. And of course, in the Roman Catholic Church, the exorcism is very, very institutionalized. A bishop has to give permission for it. Even though Father Lawrence was the exorcist, Bishop at the time, Bishop Stanislaus Brejana, he was Poland originally, had to give permission for this. Now, I was not privy to any of that, but obviously that's what happened. And there were very, very strict rules on how to do this. There were a group of us who assisted, one doctor, two nurses, and two attendants, of whom I was one. And I think Father Lawrence might have had his eye on me as a future exorcist once I was ordained to the priesthood, which I never was. And so the very, very institutionalized form of exorcism would take place. And one of the strangest things before we would begin with this was that I would interview the patients who were subject to exorcism. And I was amazed because out of 7 of them we worked with, 5 of them said they had had UFO experiences. The worst one I was involved with was October 73 was Barbara, a 17-year-old girl. And she said that she had seen little gray figures by her bed. And this is even in the hospital. Bright lights in the sky over the river. That's the St. Lawrence River. 3 nights before each of these events. And Father Lawrence had said, I went to him, I said, shouldn't we pay attention to this? He said, well, and again, a very kind and compassionate man, but he said in so many words that these people are inmates at a state hospital. So, you shouldn't really listen to everything they say. I wish we had, because the connections were manifesting even then. Ben, you have any thoughts so far?
I do have an interesting one. There's it makes me think of what's his name, Aleister Crowley, and his demon that he worked with. That if you ever saw an artist rendering of what he saw when when he did an artist rendering, it looked like a gray. Mm-hmm. So I guess that there's this line has sort of been drawn before, perhaps.
Yes, indeed. Well, again, the labels we put on things. How many, if the alien abduction thing is true, how many ancient stories of the incubus and succubus, or the, fairy, or the demon on the chest? How many of those were actually,
or the giant,
or the giant? Yeah, how many of those were actually aliens? So Barbara's case, kind of classic. I found that it was funny. The seminary faculty at Wadhams was very sympathetic to what I was doing. I was shocked. They set up special private courses for me in abnormal psychology to be able to tell supposedly who's got paranormal problems and who's just plain nuts. And it wasn't that simple. They were intertwined sometimes. External phenomena, drug addiction, in the case of Barbara, Ouija boards, this terrible child being who she said was an Asian prince. It was actually, we decided was a demon. It was quite obvious. And the alien encounters and possible abductions. But throughout this this case, I just got the impression that it wasn't really what it appeared to be. I think we were being played by this entity. I think it was a parasite. It was feeding off what we were doing. So I think it was using the exorcism ritual. And of course, I got suspicions of this, and I bounced a few of them off Father Lawrence, but I'm 20 years old, 21 years old. Who's going to listen to me? But really got an education about a year later in the Bridgeport poltergeist case. And the plot thickens here. That's me. At this point, I was finishing up at Wadhams Hall, and I was joining the Orthodox Church at the time. It's something you didn't do. And I went to their seminary in New York, and there's Ed Lorraine and Father William Charbonneau, who became so famous during this case that people would write to him from all over the world, Father Bill, Bridgeport, Connecticut, and he'd get them. And we have various reports from the police here Patrolman Joseph Tomek at the time. I'm still in touch with him. He's in his 80s and retired in Florida. And he was one of the police officers who witnessed things in this house. And in this page 1, he reports what the residents had seen, and then he tells what the police themselves saw. And you can read this. The refrigerator rise 6 inches off the floor. That happened on several occasions, and I was witness to one of those, surrounded by police and firefighters. And all sorts of things were going on here. And our assumption was this was a demon. So we were waiting for the Diocese of Bridgeport, for the Bishop of Bridgeport to give permission for an exorcism of this house to be performed by Father Charbonneau. So meanwhile, Ed Warren would usually call the media in. I don't know what that was supposed to help, but he did that, and all hell, if you will, broke loose, and there were several thousand people gathered outside this house at any one time, and the news went all over the world on the wire services and everything else. And I figured I'm on thin ice at the seminary as it is. I don't use my last name, so they would always refer to Paul the seminarian in the press accounts. The little girl Marcy was at the center of the family there, and certainly the only child in the house. And of course, the parapsychologist might say that she was approaching puberty. She was 10 years old, and so all this energy gets released, and she could be the agent of a poltergeist. Well, I think they say that because they have no other better explanation, and I think we do. That's her bedroom there, where things would happen frequently. At one point here, and this was a real educational thing for me, on the Monday night of the case, the day out, this is November 25th, 1974, I was a number of things had happened around the house. I'd been injured by a television set, that sort of, and I was over here with Marcy, and 4 things, and I'd gotten the impression from the minute I stepped foot in this place, there were 4 entities. I don't know why, but I just felt that way. And this is what they looked like, is what they felt like. And we were playing Monopoly over here, and 4 of these things came out of her room. One of them came and stood right in front of me. The only people in the house at the time were a reporter, John Sopko from the Bridgeport Post, a neighbor, and the Gooden parents, the adoptive parents. And this thing stood right in front of me. I got no impression of evil as such. I got an impression of complete otherness. This is what I would call alien. I'm not saying it was from some other planet. What meaning does that even have in some of these situations, which we'll get into in a minute when we're talking about parallel worlds? Well, I had a physical altercation with this thing. I pushed against it. It pushed back. It was physical. It got around me and threw the girl across the room. And that is all written about in our book, Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong. And it really, really rocked my world, because it shattered my belief system. These are supposed to be spirits. So many, many years later, not that many years later, I began to realize that there are connections between things that are not traditionally associated with one another. I don't know, Ben, any comment on that?
Well, I guess it's kind of it's sort of a symptom of a flap area, if you will. Flap area being, a place in which, multiple different kinds of phenomena happen, whether it's UFOs, Bigfoot, other types of cryptids, poltergeist phenomena, or increased psychic abilities, or something to that effect. Great example, other than Bridgeport, would be Point Pleasant, West Virginia, during the time of Mothman. Everyone likes to laser focus on Mothman, but there were plenty of other things going on at the same time, up to and including cryptids, UFOs, psychic activity, etc.
Right. And we didn't think to look anywhere else at the time. However, later on, and this is way later on, like over 40 years, I was contacted by William J. Hall, who wrote the definitive book on this case, The World's Most Haunted House. And he interviewed me, and I said, "Look, Bill, look around for other things that were happening in the area at the time." Ed Warren had the term a sort of a bleed through case. That when something was happening in the house, even he noticed that something might be happening in the house next door. And sure enough, Bill found a bunch of stuff about other things going on, and people were so terrified of the press that they didn't say anything about it. And also in the Bridgeport area, increased UFO reports around that time. One particularly spectacular one took place here at the old Remington Arms. It sounds like an apartment complex, but it was actually the Remington Arms Company where they made Remington firearms. And that closed in 1988, but you had a lot of UFO activity around here after the place was abandoned. So whether that's connected or not that far from Lindley Street where this house was with the activity, but there were increasing numbers of UFO sightings in 1974 and 75. And we also found something we in later years would pay attention to, and that's a lot of sandy and clay soils in this area that contribute to the conductivity of electromagnetic fields and therefore paranormal phenomena or the perception of paranormal phenomena. And this case became so famous, it's now, here we were on the Travel Channel in September of 2020, and I guess they're still airing that. I can tell that because I get a whole spate of Facebook friend requests whenever they show it. Now, by the end of the 1970s, and Ben grew up with all this because during listening to those, a couple of hundred lectures, I was running into things that just did not fit the old mold. The exorcisms I felt were something more than they appeared to be, and they were doing more harm than good at times. And I was running into people who were seeing ghosts of themselves, disappearing buildings that would be there one day and gone the next. And this, I mean, don't worry, this is fake, but this is a sort of thing, time slips, and all sorts of doppelgangers, people seeing ghosts of themselves, as I say, and all this business. And the old mold, it just didn't fit. It wasn't about dead people. So welcome to the multiverse. An open system with exchange of energy among worlds and probable exchange of inhabitants too. This is good physics today. It's interpreted in different ways sometimes. We've had eminent physicists on our show, including Fred Allen Wolf, who pretty much agree with our interpretation that we have multiple worlds, multiple outcomes, multiple versions of ourselves moving in and out of each other all the time. Multiverse experiences equal paranormal experiences in our experience. How does this work? Well, one of the main keys would be quantum entanglement. And, physicists didn't like this when they started working on this in the 19th century and then finally coming up through the 20th and reaching the conclusions they did. Einstein didn't like it at all. He called it, but he couldn't deny it. Quantum entanglement, spooky action at a distance. So maybe he used that term more appropriately than he realized, that there seem to be connections between things in different worlds, even at tremendous distances. So physicists will often say, well, this is the case on the microscopic level, not even microscopic, on the subatomic level, but it doesn't really have much relevance on the macroscopic level, the level of people and trees and grasshoppers. Well, I mean, that's like saying, you can get a little bit pregnant, to use an old expression. I think that this is the defining principle behind our own human experience. Very simple analogy. You've got all these bubbles, and as physicists actually call at the creation of the Big Bang a space-time foam, with each of the bubbles kind of being a different world, different time stream, and everything else. And here you've got the woman walking the dog, but with all possible outcomes being in the multiverse, theoretically, there are worlds in which the dog is walking the woman. And you've got here's UFOs coming and going, Loch Ness and all this stuff, and us trying to figure it out, and parasites, or aliens, or you tell me. Just to refine this term a bit, we've got world families, worlds with very similar or the same laws of physics that we go through every day. Now, many worlds do not have the same laws of physics as ours does, or as ours do, because obviously you've got refrigerators floating around the house in Bridgeport. And in our opinion, we actually had to invent a term for this. We could have very well have had an overwash taking place with worlds that were combining, where the laws of physics were different and the thing was weightless. It might be just that simple. What really pushed me over the edge was a case in 1979 when I had finished. I'd been thrown out of the seminary in 1977 they didn't like the paranormal work. They didn't like Erin and Lorraine Warren, and I guess they didn't like me anymore either. So out I went, and I had nothing, and I was living in a cottage by a lake writing for the Connecticut Dance Theater of all things. And a phone rang, and it was a young girl from the University of Connecticut who said that she and her family, or her sister and some friends had been in York Harbor, Maine. Now, many people who are listening have been to York Beach, York Harbor, lovely place. So we spent a lot of happy summers there ourselves, happy weeks. And in the back country, there are a lot of old roads and this sort of thing. And they had been driving through here, and this is, as I say, 1979. And they happened to see a rather nondescript house with a big yard in front, a ranch house. And they, the younger sister had said, "Stop the car. That's my house." So before they could stop her, she ran up to the door, started pounding. And the woman who answered the door screamed when she saw this girl. A man, this was a childless couple in their 40s, came to the door and he couldn't speak. Finally, the girl said, "I'm sorry to bother you. I just felt as though I know this house." And the man said, "Well, you ought to know this house. You haunt it." So as a result, I was really interested in this, and they said their goodbyes and departed rapidly, and they ended up getting a name on the mailbox, and I tracked the people down because my mother's family had a home around here in the summers for really over 100 years. And so I was able to find out who these people were. When I met with them, I got the story that they had seen this girl in a transparent form doing various things around the house. The girl, whom I sent for a psychological testing, it turned out to be, a little not needing any further attention in that direction, would say that she had dreams, vivid dreams of being in this house doing what they had seen her doing in transparent form, only not at the same time they were seeing it. So this turned into a really fascinating case. And I think that if we had applied what we think we know today to this, we would say that, and the reason all phenomena stopped as soon as they met on by that front door, was that the wave function had been collapsed, the two worlds had joined, and you didn't have any more phenomena. A physicist might put it that way. Here are some practical applications of this. I don't trust photos I don't take myself or that aren't taken by someone I trust implicitly. And here is one who may be caught between different worlds. This is a woman who was being followed by a reporter who's a friend of mine from the Baltimore Sun. And when she got the pictures back, she was being featured in the Baltimore Sun because of her tremendous life. She had been a Holocaust survivor and really amazing life, had made it to America. And here she was at the optometrist's office. And you can see right through his hand to her head behind, and you can see right through his arm. And here's my hard-nosed reporter friend who usually covered politics in the Baltimore area. And she said, "Could this guy be an angel?" So I said, "Well, I mean, I'm sure he's very nice, but he's a licensed optometrist in the state of Maryland. So, whatever he is, he's, just doing his thing." So I think in the multiverse perspective, and maybe Ben has a comment on this, he was there in one world, just as an intersect point was crossing over where he was there. That's when the picture was snapped. I think that's pretty much how it works.
I'd agree. I also never noticed, I don't know if it's just how the photo comes across, but it seems like the resolution's really dark, if that was how it was originally.
Well, it's been scanned a bunch of times.
That's fair.
Yeah, but it has not been manipulated.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing is the lighting. Even if you do scan it a bunch of times, it doesn't change that much. So I think, as someone who would be a professional journalist, snapping something like this, I can see why it would be very jarring.
Oh, yes, exactly. This was in the early 80s. So, I mean, it wasn't like back in the 50s, but still. Here is Remy the dog, whom you met, Ben, when we were on this case in Pennsylvania. And the poor thing is, Bum is disappearing here, and it's the same principle. I think he's there in one and not in the other world where the intersect point happens to be going by as as the photo is being taken here. So Remy's fine, by the way. And again, parallel worlds, parallel lives, various versions of ourselves. It's a whole new ball game here, kids. So anything that can happen, does happen, and is out there somewhere or somewhen. And we think this explains the paranormal very largely. And Ben mentioned flap areas. I'm going to talk about some of these.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I kind of jumped the gun there.
No, it's all right.
But it's a little introduction to some of the ones we've been working on, notably the Bridgeport Triangle, which is over in our neck of the woods, centered around the Bridgeport State Forest. Bridgewater State Forest. Jeez.
You've had a long day.
It's one of those days. So the Bridgewater Triangle is a lot of fun, a lot of interesting things there. We've gone and investigated it a handful of times, and you went very recently, Dad.
Yeah, your brother and I were there just a few weeks ago, and it was kind of interesting. We were looking around for some things and checking out the area where the Pukwudgie situations were happening.
Indeed. And we also have Litchfield County, which is not too far away from the Danbury Public Library. As we've mentioned before, we've continued to work on it and continued to work on it and continued to work on it and come across pretty much anything you could think of there. Then the Pennsylvania Triangle, which we've already talked about a couple of times, with poor Remy the dog disappearing halfway through. Rendlesham Forest, which if that rings a bell, it should, especially with the RAF Bentwaters sightings that we have done a bunch of shows on. What was it, 16 hours on the air we've done with?
We did. There are others who exceeded us, but not up to that point.
No, but definitely very, very interesting. And of course, the Ohio Valley with Mothman, as mentioned previous in the show. Wow, we've already mentioned most of these. That's surprising.
We're rolling right along.
I know. And the Tyler County and the Big Thicket, which is definitely something we've been wanting to investigate. That's down in Texas. We haven't had a chance to because mostly every time we've attempted to, something awful has happened to whoever has informed us about it.
Yes, people are dying right and left, or have been, and stay tuned on that one. And typical flap area phenomena, you name it. And of course, we have parasite and poltergeist activity, upticks in that. And whether some of the early cases, the Bridgeport case, there was a New Haven case, 1979, whether that was actually a part of a flap area. I didn't have this information at the time, so maybe not. Here is we refer to as Connecticut Skinwalker Ranch. We've been investigating this for the last 16 years. And there's a youthful Ben with our very first video camera.
If you thought my father's camera skills were like the Blair Witch Project, oh boy, were mine worse.
Well, we got along. And of course, here's the orb thing all over again. I mean, are these UFOs? Are they spirits? Are they neither? One of our working theories is that these are living things, and UFOs as living things is discussed narrowly, but is considered a legitimate topic. And these we think are living things that feed around the boundaries of these parallel worlds we've been talking about. Because what are they made of? Plasma. And plasma beings have been speculated upon by astrobiologists and even by the great Carl Sagan years ago. So again, the first day of school here on this, and we're actually looking for an astrobiologist, a person who studies extraterrestrial life or the possibilities thereof, for some work we're planning to do. Here is the triangle, roughly, and it's not that everything is limited to the inside of this triangle, but triangle is a research tool. And at this point, this has been pushed out since 2005 to about 330 square miles, all the way over to the Hudson Valley. Here's the 1783 farmhouse, which was the origin of it. Over here in Goshen, as we refer to as the funny farm. And one thing with these flap areas, we always run into the military or something that looks like the military. Here is a photograph from inside this 1783 farmhouse. People say, aha, a ghost. Well, we don't think so. We think that's a world boundary.
Aha, another world boundary.
Yeah, a brain, B-R-A-N-E, as a physicist would say. Now, this appears to be two versions of the same reality imposed upon one another, two or more. And then, after all our alleged experts looking at this for years, a listener to our radio show in Colorado wrote, how come you didn't mention the alien? So here's this apparent face here, which does not seem to be, which several photo people have told us is not part of this refrigerator here. Mouth is very clear, and apparently looking out from behind the door or something like that. So one of the strange things about this area is there seem to be all sorts of different kinds of aliens in a broad sense, including Ashwar. Now, here we were in 2010. We just done some work with a film crew from New York, and it was very, very, remember how cold it was that night?
Oh, yeah, geez.
And we were talking to the little 4-year-old boy in the house, and he said his invisible friend Ashwar was in the tree outside the house in front, because our people lived in trees. So we went out, we pointed the infrared camera up, and we get this tadpole-like thing coming down, and all of a sudden in the final frame, there's a flash and it disappears. Now, we assumed this would be spelled ASHWAR. Well, our intrepid colleague, Shane Searway, turned out to be quite the researcher, and he found ACHUAR, which was an obscure Central and South American tribe who worshipped tree spirits and sometimes lived in trees, and they were the Ashwar. Now, how's a 4-year-old kid in Connecticut going to know about this? Well, by the time he was a young teen, Ashwar was telling him to hurt his mother, so Ashwar turned out to be a parasite. And also to cause apparently typographical errors. But what label to use? Alien, demon, what?
It could just be an accent. What?
Right. Well, here's an accent for you. If you can tell us what this is quite interesting. There, also in the Litchfield Triangle, there were a series of break-ins in a particular area, and the police couldn't figure it out, and nothing was taken. But a family put security cameras in their home, and in the kitchen one day, while they were out, this thing appeared at the sink. Now, whatever the heck this is, I mean, alien, reptilian, what?
It's really looking at those kitchen knives, though.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't want to speculate about that. Just this is the sort of thing we run into, things that don't even have names yet in these flap areas. And again, connections, UFOs, cryptids, as we call it, the ghostly phenomena, it's all there. And just briefly about the Pennsylvania Triangle here. It's pretty much in Clearfield County. Now, this is a new case for us. We've only been working on it since 2016. And here, just within one drone shot, which was taken after, this is where we were when we got that UFO video we showed you earlier. We were standing there, and it was up here. And we sent the drone up to approximately where it might have been. It was about, because it might have been, it's very difficult to tell the altitude of something from the ground without equipment. And there are UFO sightings here. My own Bigfoot encounter was right here in 2016, September 16th, 2016. Over here in the house, you've got ghostly phenomena, shadow people, and UFO sightings. Over here on the kind of like the magnetic hill full of iron from a meteor strike in about the year 1500, you've got Bigfoot and UFOs. Little girl's terrified little girl Bigfoot sighting here. To this day, she won't talk to us because she's too frightened. Here's another Bigfoot sighting by Shane Searway. I mean, just what is this, like a square quarter mile, maybe? So
probably just shy. It's pretty small.
Yeah, I mean, this is how active this area is, and we're still working on it. Here's a typical online questionnaire filing from somebody in that area. Spirit activity, UFO, lights, aliens, Bigfoot activity, all the same things we're talking about. So again, more connections between things like poltergeists, UFOs, and aliens. And every poltergeist I run into, it just comes across as alien to me. Not dead people, not demons, but very, very other. So apparently the multiverse is the big picture. Get beyond the context, and the labels are our explanations. And think outside the labels on the box, I'd say. And so I guess the only lessons we could draw are,
well, nothing is what it appears to be. Everything we know is wrong, and it's the first day of school.
Any comments further, Ben?
Well, I think it's important to note that all of human experience is filtered entirely through our perception. And there's an objective reality and a subjective experience of the objective reality. So it's very hard. And it's not like we probably don't make it much easier, but we do our best to try and encompass as much as we can.
Right. Well, we'll just finish up here, and then people can look at us. It'll probably be the scariest part of the presentation.
That's fair.
Just our more recent books. Next year, we've always been very kindly invited to speak at the UFO conferences. We thought we should probably write a book about the subject, so that's next year. And then some of the older books here you could look at. It's all on the Behind the Paranormal website. And here's our radio show going on 14 years on the air. Very pleased to have new listeners, and it's a call-in show. You can talk to the guests. And here's how you would be able to see it. And behindtheparanormal.com is probably the best way to get information about it. And there are also over 1,000 hours of shows that are free. So check that out.
And that's also in pretty much any podcast platform as well.
Where am I?
Ghostly arm.
There we are. Yes. Okay. Yeah. All right. So, all right. Well, okay, that works. Thank you, everyone. It's been wonderful. And hopefully next year we'll be in person at the Western Connecticut UFO Conference. And many thanks to Aurelio Maraca, the organizer. And we refer you to our show last Sunday, which is now on iTunes and YouTube and all the rest. And also at the library site, where we had open lines simulcasting from the library with Kathleen Martin to honor the 60th anniversary of the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case. So I wish I could do that Vulcan thing, but I can't.
There we go.
Oh, Ben can do it.
Live long and
Okay.
prosper.
Very good. Bless everyone.